Police have confirmed an FBI raid at a massage business.
Police busted massage parlor in downtown Franklin.
West Alabama Human Trafficking Task Force carried out search warrants at 3 massage parlors.
Nationwide operation involving hundreds of law enforcement agencies.
Federal authorities have just delivered one of the most significant human trafficking crackdowns of the year. A coordinated multi-state raid targeting a sprawling network of Chinese-run massage parlors operating under the radar of ordinary American life. In a single week of non-stop enforcement known as Operation Coast to Coast, more than 30 suspects were taken into custody, and over 60 victims were rescued from forced labor and sexual exploitation. The scope of the investigation stunned even veteran agents because of how far the network had spread, from Texas and California to New York, Missouri, and Oklahoma. For years, many assumed trafficking of this kind existed only on the fringes of big cities or near international borders. This week shattered that belief. The investigation revealed a transnational criminal structure hiding in plain sight, using ordinary storefronts in suburban strip malls to traffic women across the country while funneling profits back to overseas crime syndicates in China. What appeared to be a row of neighborhood spas and wellness centers was, in reality, a nationwide system of confinement, coercion, and profit. The arrests alone would have been headline news, but what those numbers reveal is even more disturbing. Homeland Security investigations agents say the network functioned with the discipline and secrecy of an organized cartel, rotating victims across state lines, forging business licenses, and laundering millions through small shell companies disguised as wellness consultancies. Each so-called spa was not simply offering illegal services. It was a fully integrated node in a transnational enterprise that relied on deception, digital coordination, and fear. Victims, mostly Chinese nationals, were recruited through fraudulent job ads, promised legal work, and then stripped of their passports the moment they arrived. They were forced to live behind curtained walls, sleeping on thin mattresses in rooms no bigger than closets, their every movement tracked by cameras and supervisors. The discovery shocked even seasoned investigators who described the conditions as industrialized exploitation. The speed and precision of the crackdown underline how large this hidden economy had become. In the early hours of the operation, tactical teams from Homeland Security, the Austin Police Department, and more than 150 partner agencies executed warrants at over 20 locations simultaneously. In one city block alone, agents breached 3 adjacent businesses that shared a single hidden hallway, proof of how deliberately the network had embedded itself into local infrastructure. Each arrest represented the dismantling of another link in a nationwide chain that blended labor exploitation and financial crime. Federal sources confirmed that this was not a case of isolated wrongdoing by individual owners. It was a coordinated system with command and control originating overseas.
We have really focused on this human trafficking issue, and it's gotten really interesting lately. Have y'all seen the Chinese component of this? This is crazy.
Agents seized ledgers, encrypted phones, and computers containing thousands of messages between U.S. facilitators and offshore coordinators who arranged payments, client schedules, and victim transfers. The digital trail, officials say, connects these U.S. operations directly to Chinese organized crime syndicates that have been on federal watch lists for years. For law enforcement, this week's results send 2 clear messages. First, that human trafficking enterprises are no longer confined to border crossings or coastal cities. They are already operating inside America's heartland. And second, that federal agencies are prepared to respond with the same strength they bring to narcotics and terrorism cases. Every warrant executed, every survivor rescued, and every suspect booked was part of a broader effort to expose an underground economy built on control and silence. Officials call this the beginning of a long-term campaign to eradicate trafficking networks hiding behind legitimate businesses. Their warning is blunt. For every parlor shut down, another may try to open. But the days of operating in the shadows are ending. Behind the quiet storefronts and dimly lit signs, what agents uncovered during the raids was far worse than anyone expected. Inside the massage parlors, investigators found a world built on fear, isolation, and control. Victims, mostly women from China, were forced to live and work under constant surveillance, their freedom replaced by daily quotas and hidden cameras. Some slept on thin blankets behind massage tables, others in closets or storage rooms converted into makeshift dormitories. The air smelled of disinfectant and cigarette smoke, and the walls were lined with soundproofing foam to muffle the noise of constant movement. Federal officers said the scenes they encountered were not businesses but holding cells, where women were treated as replaceable assets. Most had entered the United States legally on work or student visas, then been coerced into debt bondage through threats, forged contracts, or confiscated passports. When questioned, many victims said they were told that police in America would not protect them, that their only option was obedience. For some, the abuse had gone on for years, stretching across multiple states. What the raids exposed was not just crime, it was a nationwide system of human exploitation hiding behind a veneer of normalcy. Homeland Security analysts now confirm that the network's financial and logistical backbone traces back to Chinese organized crime syndicates operating under legitimate business fronts overseas. These groups manage a sprawling infrastructure of recruiters, transporters, and accountants who keep the trafficking machine running. Agents discovered wire transfers routed through shell companies in Hong Kong and Macau, disguised as payments for consulting services or real estate management. In reality, those transfers represented the profits from sexual servitude and forced labor. The laundering system was advanced. Money moved from small business accounts in the U.S. into international firms, split into microtransactions, and reassembled offshore to avoid financial tracking. Investigators also found digital ledgers detailing rotations of victims every few months, a tactic designed to prevent familiarity with their surroundings and minimize escape attempts. According to DHS intelligence, some of these victims were trafficked through Canada before entering the United States, showing the global reach of the syndicate. Federal officials called it one of the most complex trafficking finance pipelines ever uncovered on U.S. soil. The coordination behind Operation Coast to Coast was equally complex. More than 150 law enforcement agencies participated, sharing intelligence through Homeland Security's Human Trafficking Training Center, HTTC, to map connections between cities. Each jurisdiction handled a piece of the larger puzzle: surveillance, undercover operations, data tracing, and financial forensics. The simultaneous raids across 5 states were designed to dismantle the network in one strike, leaving no time for suspects to flee or destroy evidence. By the end of the week, 30 individuals were in federal custody. The charges included human trafficking, conspiracy, immigration fraud, money laundering, racketeering, and prostitution offenses. Among them were several mid-level coordinators responsible for recruiting victims through online ads, purchasing flight tickets, and managing financial transfers to offshore accounts. Investigators said these arrests marked the first time federal prosecutors will pursue the case using racketeering and transnational organized crime statutes, the same tools once reserved for drug cartels and terror cells. Among the rescued victims was a 14-year-old girl discovered during a linked operation in another state. She told investigators she had been trafficked through online websites. Her trafficker, a 38-year-old man with prior convictions for identity theft and visa fraud, was arrested and now faces federal charges for child exploitation and human trafficking. Agents described her case as a reflection of how deep this industry runs. Officials stressed that this rescue was not an anomaly. It was evidence that minors are increasingly being drawn into sophisticated trafficking circuits that exploit immigration systems and digital anonymity. As the dust settled from the raids, agents said the mission had only one goal: to expose the hidden infrastructure of modern slavery operating inside the United States. The arrests, they emphasized, were only the beginning of a much larger campaign to dismantle every remaining cell in this network, no matter how far it reaches or how many walls it hides behind. As the last warrants were executed and the suspects were transported into custody, the focus shifted from enforcement to recovery. The Federal Command Center overseeing Operation Coast to Coast moved quickly to stabilize the human side of the crisis. Dozens of nonprofit partners, Safe House, Freedom Network USA, and the Salvation Army Trafficking Response Team were mobilized to assist the rescued victims. Medical units and trauma counselors arrived on site within hours, transforming temporary command posts into triage centers. Many of the women were disoriented, dehydrated, and terrified. Some had not stepped outside in months. Translators were brought in to bridge the language barrier, and officers were instructed to treat each person as a survivor rather than a suspect. Agents later said this stage of the operation was as complex as the raids themselves, rescuing people who had been conditioned to fear help. Federal officials confirmed that the victims' identities are being protected and that applications are underway for T visas, allowing them to remain in the United States as witnesses and survivors of trafficking. Every rescued woman was paired with an advocate to ensure shelter, medical care, and legal guidance. Homeland Security described the humanitarian response as a critical proof of concept, showing that major operations can dismantle networks without abandoning those trapped inside them. But the investigation did not end with the arrests. What agents seized, computers, ledgers, phones, and bank records, may take months to process. Each seized device contains evidence that could expose additional accomplices and front companies operating in other states. The Department of Justice, Homeland Security Investigations, and IRS Criminal Division have created a joint analytical team to map every financial transaction linked to the raids. Early reviews show money funneled through more than 200 shell accounts, distributed across U.S. banks and fintech platforms before being reassembled in overseas corporations. DHS cyber units are tracing cryptocurrency transfers tied to the same network, revealing how traffickers have begun using digital assets to hide profits. Officials say at least a dozen related businesses remain under active surveillance, including nail salons, import companies, and wellness centers suspected of serving as replacements for the shuttered massage parlors. The federal goal now is disruption, not just to arrest individuals, but to eliminate the infrastructure that allows trafficking to regenerate. Agents are also coordinating with Interpol and Chinese law enforcement to locate overseas ringleaders believed to be directing operations from abroad. One senior Homeland Security official called the raids the first domino in a much larger chain. Public reaction has been strong and emotional. Communities near the raided businesses expressed relief that what they long suspected had finally been proven true. Residents said they often saw women shuttled in vans at night, windows covered, doors locked, but no one imagined the scale of the operation. Advocacy groups are urging state legislatures to adopt tighter licensing laws for massage and spa businesses, including random inspections and financial reporting requirements. Federal lawmakers have also proposed expanding trafficking task forces and requiring mandatory training for local code inspectors who might unknowingly approve front operations. For many, the case serves as a wake-up call that organized exploitation is not a distant crime. It is a domestic epidemic. Homeland Security officials closed their final press briefing with a warning. Operation Coast to Coast may have delivered one of the largest trafficking takedowns in recent memory, but the threat is far from over. The illicit massage industry is resilient, constantly adapting, changing names, and reopening under new ownership within months of a raid. Agents described it as a Hydra effect. Cut off one head and two more appear elsewhere. That is why federal authorities say the operation will continue indefinitely, tracking every lead, freezing every account, and dismantling every shell business tied to the network. "We're not just chasing traffickers," one agent said. "We're dismantling the system that protects them." For the women rescued, the road ahead is one of rebuilding and recovery. For the agencies involved, the mission is not over until every hidden corridor, every false storefront, and every trafficker who profits from suffering is brought to justice. And as one federal commander concluded in Washington, this was never just about massage parlors. This was about reclaiming human freedom inside our own borders. And that fight has only begun.